right, what is up, y'all? I'm excited to be here today because today we're talking about the infamous, you know what I'm talking about when I say the slippery slope. All right, and specifically today we're talking about how to slip and not slide. And this is a concept that me and Maurice came up with in one of our coaching sessions. And you know how it is to get into a health program or finish reading a book or go through a seminar progression and get really excited about a health program or a nutrition program or something like that, and you go all in with it and you see a lot of great results, and at some point you start to fade and you start to slip away and you start to question, you start to question things in general, you start to question whether you're on path and if you can make it back, and it's at that point that we're at risk, I think, of what we were talking about the other day, which is sliding off completely. And so we need some kind of a system or a thought process or a step-based program or something to get us back on track and to get us thinking the right way about this stuff so that when it happens, we have something to work with it. And so that's what this talk is really about. Okay, it's like a little 5-step process we came up, and we may adjust it in the future or something like that, but I feel like it's pretty solid right now. So what happened was Maurice called me up and he said, hey, I want to schedule a visit with you because I feel like I've been kind of slipping off of my morning routine, and I'm letting some things slide here and there, and I'm skipping my meditation, and I'm having urges and cravings for things that I didn't before, and some of my changes aren't happening like they did in the beginning. And the first thing that I said to Maurice, I remember saying, you know what I love about you, man, is you always come back. And when I say you always come back, it didn't mean like he always comes back to see me in sessions, which we're both thankful and we think that's a really great thing. What I meant was like you always continue to come back and either come back to the things that serve you or at least question what it is you're doing. You have this conscious participation in the process, which I think makes all the difference in the world. So he came in for a session and we sat down and we talked a bunch of things out, and it was so great. And so we came up with this little 5-step process, and this is what I want to share with you guys today. So I'm going to touch on each one of these points. This is how to slip and not slide. Slip means, you kind of just go off a little bit, but you don't go off too big or too long. Sliding means like you're at risk of completely like moving away from these things that make you healthy and happy. All right, so the first step is having a pre-commitment to always come back. The second step is expecting the ebb and flow, the ins and outs, the ups and downs. The third step is having a vision for yourself for optimal health and an optimal life in general. And the fourth step is committing to daily health even when you don't feel like it. And then the fifth step is getting some wins early in the day with some kind of a morning routine or something like that. So let us begin. Let's get into this. So the first thing is having a pre-commitment to always come back. And again, the topic that we're talking about today is minimizing the slip and avoiding the slide, right? Minimizing going off, the severity, the frequency, and trying to avoid completely moving away from what it is that we need to be doing for ourselves, right? So having a pre-commitment to always come back. I think this is useful because we start to minimize or mitigate or eliminate the perfectionist mindset. And I think what derails a lot of us when we begin on something, and specifically we're talking about like a health-based program or a nutrition program, what really gets a lot of us is this perfectionist mindset. And this is unconscious. I don't think we deliberately think about this, consciously think about this, but we get into something and we get so excited about it that we overload ourselves with goals, and we try to accomplish those things, and we do a really good job of it for a little bit, and then at some point we can't keep up with it because it's too much or too strict, or we just have this perception that we have to be perfect with it or else we're not doing it right or something like that. And again, that's where we're kind of at risk for completely moving away from what it is, because a lot of us will throw our hands up, we'll look for something different to do, or we'll completely fall off, okay? So having a pre-commitment with yourself here and now, no matter where you're at with your health program, if you're about to start on something, if you're in the middle of something, if you've been doing it for years, the next thing that you encounter, whatever that is, having a pre-commitment now to always come back starts to mitigate that perfectionist mindset. Just tell yourself right now and forever, no matter what happens, I'm always going to come back to the things that make me healthy and happy. All right, now, having a pre-commitment to come back implies that we're going to have some off periods, okay? So And this is hard for some of us to accept, I think, especially when we're just starting in something and we're very excited about it, or we're having such good results and we're in the slipstream and we're like, man, I'm doing so good right now. There's no way I'm ever going to go back, right? I think we start to get a little cocky, a little greedy with the results that we're experiencing, and with how good that we're doing with things. Okay, now I understand there's some things that some of us have probably nixed and we will never go back to. Some people just don't drink and won't ever drink again. I don't think I'm ever going to go back to bread or wheat or anything. Doesn't mean that I might not allow myself to have something super special somewhere, but that's a very conscious decision. But again, what we're talking about here is health habits in general, our nutrition habits in general. So if I have a pre-commitment to always come back, that implies that I'm going to go off. So then I want to expect this ebb and flow. And it was funny because in our discussion, at first, when I was talking with Maurice, I said, I told him, I was like, look, man, nobody's ever immune. And what I mean by that is nobody is ever immune to falling off to some degree. And he was like, well, this is the first time it's been happening to me, and it just made me laugh because it really literally was the first time in 6 or 8 months that he had anything that wasn't just like amazing and shifting in a good direction. In his mind, it was the first hint of starting to not do the things that got him to where he was in the first place, and I just thought it was really interesting to see someone at that phase in their journey, So there's some great things that come out of having an expectation for the ebb and flow, all right? And I want to touch on those things real quick. So first of all, it helps you appreciate the good times, and it gives you something to compare to the good times, okay? So if things were always the same way, if they were always great all the time, and they never changed, I don't know that we would realize that they're great because there'd be nothing to compare them to. So having that ebb and flow helps you appreciate the good times, and it also gives you this desire to get back to the good times. So it's like, anytime you have something that you want to see change, or something that you're not happy about, or something that you're dissatisfied with, I don't think that's a bad thing. We just don't want to stay there. We want to use that to fuel ourselves to do something about it and move in the direction of improving ourselves. And so that ebb and flow, being in a slight funk or being in a dark hole, whatever that is, once we acknowledge that and we notice it, then we have this desire to want to come back to what it was that was serving us and what it is that we think is going to make us healthy and happy. And so, the first thing is appreciating the good. The ebb and flow helps you to appreciate the good. The second thing is that the ebb and flow actually gives you a desire to come back, and that's a great thing. And then we start to cultivate the skill of noticing ourselves in a funk and also cultivate the skill of coming back. Now, it's so powerful to notice yourself in a funk. And, if you have a expectation of the ebb and flow, and then when you get into one of your funks or your dark holes, I call them funks and dark holes, right? Funks are you're kind of slightly off and things just don't feel right, you're just not in the mood or whatever. And then dark hole is something that you're kind of dragged down for, pretty hard for a significant period of time maybe. All right, so when we get to those points, if we had an expectation, it doesn't change the fact that they don't feel very good. But there's something about the awareness of being in that funk that changes the texture of it, it changes the feeling of it, and it changes the duration of it. So again, if I have an expectation that it's going to happen, it's not going to make me immune to it happening, but when it does happen, it just minimizes the impact to some degree, and it helps me move through it just a little bit easier. Now also, I start to cultivate the skill of noticing myself in a funk. Now this is really powerful because I think what's really dangerous is when we go off and we don't realize that we're off. And we're off for a significant period of time before realizing it, right? Or sometimes we go off and we've rationalized it so well to ourselves, we convinced ourselves that what it is that we're doing is not a problem. And I think that's a really dangerous place to be. But if I can acknowledge that I'm not where I want to be, that I'm in a funk, that there's something that I want to change, I start to cultivate the skill of noticing myself in a funk. And that starts to happen quicker and quicker. So when I get into a funk, I notice it quicker and I can start to move through it and pull myself out of it faster. I also start to cultivate the skill of coming back, and I get better at coming back. And so what happens over time is because we're aware of the fact that this is going to happen, we get very aware, we're quick to be aware of the fact that we're in the funk, and then we're quick to try to come back. what happens over time is we get better and better at it, and then the frequency of those things happening starts to get less and less, and the duration and the severity of it starts to get less and less. Now, this applies to getting into funks, but it also applies to, you could say, progress, right? Sometimes a lot of progress that we experience is front-loaded. For most people, when they first embark on something, some kind of a big change, they experience more benefits than they do later on in what they're doing, right? And I certainly experienced that. When I first came into real food and ancestral health, I lost a lot of weight, and then the weight loss that I've had over the past 10 years has been almost undetectable each year, but it's been cumulative over time. And so as I get better at, first of all, as I have an expectation that things aren't always going to change the way that I want, they're not always going to change super fast. Once I get into this mode of feeling like they're not, I had this pre-expectation, so now I notice myself there. And I start to move through it, and that patience helps me stay with it longer as well, because the name of the game, the longer that we stay with this stuff, the benefits seem to kind of plateau, but they're not. They're just very subtle, but they're cumulative over time. And so again, cultivating the skill of noticing yourself there, cultivating the skill of coming back to the things that serve you helps you stay with it longer, and that means those benefits are going to start to accumulate longer. Now, also what happens if you have this expectation and you get really good at noticing yourself in the funk, and again, it doesn't change the fact that it doesn't feel good to be in the funk, but you start to get better at it and you get better at coming back, you start to cultivate some kind of a wisdom over time, some kind of an intuition about things. And it's hard to put into words what that is, but at some point you start to realize that even like when you're in these good periods, these periods that you feel like you're in your slipstream and things are going the best they could possibly go, you start to realize, well, this isn't going to last either. So you start to cherish those things, and it's almost like you start to step back and witness what's happening versus getting so caught up in what's happening. And you could probably think back to any time that you've been in a funk and then come out of it, or if not, then I would say just, as a little homework assignment, like for the next time that you're in some kind of a funk, notice when you pull out of it. Notice when you're in a good mood again, or things seem to be going well, or you're doing really good with things. Be present with that and say to yourself, acknowledge, like, man, it was just yesterday that I felt like things were just not going that great. It was just last week that I was in this little hole and I felt like I was not going to come out of it. And because when you're in the cloud, you're in the cloud. It's hard to see that, right? But again, these little tools of having this expectation and then having an awareness of when you're in and wanting to come back and all that stuff, it really does start to cultivate some kind of a wisdom. And you can start to really appreciate the good things and reflect on this ability that you have to notice yourself in a hole and then come out of it. All right, so the third step in the process is having a vision. So we need to have a vision for optimal health and our optimal self, period. And we say this all the time. We have intention setting seminars and workshops and programs and things like that. But it's so important, because if you don't have a vision for what it is that you want and where you're trying to go and the kind of person that you want to be, you're always focused on the things that you don't like and the things that you're not happy with. And so, we talk about this a little bit in our conscious mind, non-conscious mind characteristics. And so what happens is we're constantly obsessed with this thing that we're not happy about. And yes, maybe it makes us do some things to change things and helps us put some activities and actions into place to change things. But we're still focused on that thing that we don't like, and that's very negative and tight feeling. If I have a vision for health, if I have a vision for myself, then I am getting pulled forward and it feels a lot better. And that vision is something that I want to visit most days and I want to read through or have memorized and periodically go back and kind of revamp and edit it and refine it and fine tune it. Because if I'm constantly thinking about what it is that I want and the kind of person that I want to be and what my health is going to do for me in the future, then it's like this gravitational pull towards the things that I want to do versus looking at these things that I don't like about myself and trying to move away from them. That way of thinking is very tight and negative versus thinking about what it is that you want and the kind of person that you want to be. That's very open and very positive, and you tend to look for solutions versus being stuck in this very narrow mindset, obsessed with this one thing that you're trying to change. So a pro tip on this vision thing is that you need to constantly revisit it. And one great way to do that is kind of like what we're talking about here today, is like when you notice yourself unhappy with something, when you notice yourself in a funk, that is a chance to flip that into the opposite of it and change it into something that it is that you want. All right, so at least on a weekly basis, I sit down and I look at my envisioning statements and my affirmations and things, and I ask myself, like, what is it that keeps popping up here recently that's been kind of dragging me down or getting me in a funk periodically? And it's that thing that I want to try to negate. And so I flip that into the positive aspect of it, so that it feels good. It's a statement that feels good. And if I read that to myself every day, then I start to pull myself out of that, or I keep myself from getting into a funk based on that thing that I'm trying to work with right there. So that's a great way to constantly revamp and revisit your vision statement. All right, now the fourth step is committing to daily health even when you don't feel like it. Okay, so one of the things that Maurice brought up was that sometimes it feels like the things that he's doing, some days, most days, it's just like it's losing its luster a little bit, And I totally resonate with that to some degree. And we had this discussion about, like sometimes there's things that we need to do that just aren't that exciting. Sometimes there's things that we need to do on a daily basis that are going to facilitate health and feeling amazing, that they're just what they are. Like, we just need to do these things, right? And there may be some things that we can do to add some variety or to change things up a little bit. But in general, I would say that there's just things that we need to do, and even if they're repetitive, they're still serving a purpose, and they're still serving a benefit. And so an example, an analogy that we used together was a professional NBA player. I mean, any professional sports player, but professional NBA player. Think about how many times that person has practiced a free throw, or think about how many times that person has practiced a shot, and how many times has that person been like, you know what, I'm so sick of shooting this freaking basketball. I'd so much rather be doing something else. But that commitment to daily, consistent practice, over time, it cultivates a skill, and it cultivates an intuition and a wisdom. And in the moment, it doesn't seem like anything's changing. But that change may be subtle, but it's cumulative over time. And at some point, you become this very wise, very intuitive, health-based person, and these health habits and these things that you're doing consistently are part of who you are. They're part of your makeup. So again, sometimes the things that we have to practice on a daily basis for health and feeling amazing and being happy, they may not be that exciting, although there's things you can do to kind of change things up, but they may not be that exciting. They may seem kind of mundane and austere, but something is happening. Something powerful is happening over the long term with consistent daily practice. All right, and then the fifth thing that we talked about, the fifth step, was getting early wins in to set a tone for the day. All right, now I know that there may be some extenuating circumstances out there, like shift work and or maybe just work in general and family, and it's hard to have like a morning routine and process. So, but in general, I think most of us can probably find some things that we can do early in the day to set a tone for the day, to get some wins early in the day. Because if you can do some things at the first part of the day, if you can front load the day with some things that are good for your health and that make you feel good and make you happy, then chances are that's going to bleed over into the rest of the day. It's going to give you some momentum to make better changes throughout the rest of the day. So whether that's a morning walk, a morning solitary walk, a morning workout, a morning sitting session, meditation session, a little quiet time, whatever that might be for you, whatever things you can kind of put in there to make yourself feel like you did something beneficial for yourself, I think that's really, really powerful, again, to minimize the slip and avoid the slide, because at least you're getting that first part of the day right. And chances are, if you get that first part of the day right, then you're probably going to make some more better decisions throughout the day. And before you know it, you got a whole day that was filled with nothing but great stuff. All right, cool. So to review everything that we just covered, again, this is like a 5-step process on how to slip and not slide, basically on how to minimize going off, the severity, the duration, and try to ensure that you don't completely slide off, okay? And with your health habits, with your nutrition habits. First step is have a pre-commitment to always come back. That pre-commitment will serve you for the rest of your life because it will minimize that perfectionist mindset. Number 2 is expect the ebb and flow, expect the ins and outs, so that when they happen, they aren't a surprise. And then what happens is you start to clarify what it is you want. You get better at noticing yourself being in a funk. You get better at coming back, and it seems like over time that those things happen less often and for less duration. All right, number 3 is have a vision for yourself for optimal health and an optimal life. Have something that you're looking forward to that's pulling you forward versus focusing on the things that don't serve you and that you're not happy about. It's okay to use those things to flip them into something that you want, because that's what we use for motivation to make some change, but we want to be focused on this future version of ourselves. Number 4 is to commit to the daily things that make you healthy and happy, even when you don't feel like it. Because when you do this, then you start to cultivate a skill and a wisdom and an intuition that can only be talked about. It can't be given to you. A coach can't give it to you. A book can't give it to you. You can't just have it happen to you out of nowhere. It's something that happens over time. But over time, a commitment to the things that make you healthy and happy, even when you don't feel like it, you start to develop this wisdom, intuition, and you start to become the kind of person that you want to be as far as health goes. It starts to become ingrained in you. And then finally, number 5 is get some wins early in the day. Try to front load your day with a good health routine, a morning workout, a walk, a meditation session, the first meal of the day, getting it spot on, something along those lines, so that you have some kind of an accomplishment and it makes you feel like you want to do some more better things for yourself throughout the rest of the day, okay? So hopefully that was useful, and if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please send them our way so we can make this stuff better for y'all. Y'all make an amazing day, week, month, year, life, using your vision and everything else we talk about. All right, y'all keep it real.